All right, then. Here we go again. We've had some big patches. And now it's time for the tier list, yet again. PvE group content tier list. This is going to be all about stuff in group content. So this is raids, strike missions, big open world meta events, like big meta events, that sort of stuff. This will kind of apply in Fractals. Fractals is a bit more specialized, so not really so much in Fractals, but broadly speaking, it kind of applies there as well. But again, there are some tweaks for that game mode in particular. So stay tuned for that. And once again, we're going to be doing a triple tier list, because I think that actually is the best way to do it that makes the most sense. This is going to be offensive support. So in other words, stuff that does damage and applies support. So like boons, etc. Defensive support, basically healers, right? Or things that apply boons and heal. And then finally, things that are damage classes. Things that don't apply boons, or not, that's not their main job. Their main job is to do damage. They might have some utility or support kind of on the side, but it's not really the main focus of the build. So that's how we're going to do all three of those. And I'm going to announce a few little changes here as well. Just like my previous tier lists, I'm going to very heavily weight towards win rate. So in other words, builds that increase your win rate in normal scenarios. This isn't a speedrunning tier list. This is a normal pug scenario, just throwing everyone in together. These are the builds that I think increase your win rate in content the most, and are just the most powerful for winning the game, pretty much. However, because of just how powerful certain damage builds are, I am actually going to be a little bit more generous to kind of full DPS builds this time. So that's kind of like a little change here. And here's a really fun thing, as a bit of an introduction here. The meta right now is very close, in my opinion. You won't be seeing quite as many tiers as previously, because, to be frank, everything is really, really strong. And with that in mind, I'm probably not really going to be using D tier. I think the worst builds, and honestly, there really aren't that many, like the builds that are just pretty mediocre. C tier is like mediocre, right? Or, you know, just it's okay, right? It's like, it's fine, but it's not impressive. This is probably the lowest we're going today. I don't think that anything is there. And you're going to be seeing a lot of stuff in S tier and A tier, right? Most stuff is actually up there, and then a bunch of stuff in B, and then a few things that are kind of a little bit underperforming and could use some work. So it's the game is actually in a really good state balance-wise currently in PvE. There's a few things that need to be tuned up and fixed up, and we'll see that later as we get into the other tier lists. But overall, this meta is actually probably the healthiest and most diverse we've ever seen, especially in terms of damage dealers, right? Because there are so many amazing damage dealing builds. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? So we're going to start off with our offensive supports, and with the Firebrand rework and of course lots of Herald buffs, I think we might as well go ahead and start off with that. First up, and the new king, the pretty much highest value build in the entire game. That's right, it's Herald. And actually, I am going to put Herald in a tier of its own. It's going into Omega tier. This build is absolutely incredible. It gives permanent quickness, loads of protection, fury, swiftness, might stacks, can give stability with Jalis, is incredibly tanky, has amazing crowd control, does 1 billion damage, right? And even extends boons on allies with the Facet of Nature. This build is absolutely insane. It is incredible. It is so, so powerful. One of the top builds in the game. If you had to pick only one build to deliver value to your team, it actually might be this one. Probably some of the support, the healing builds can compete with this, but it is amazing value. Simply one of the best builds in the game. Power, quickness, Herald, God mode. And then Renegade. Renegade, I think, you know, a bit of a step down from Herald. I'm going to put it in kind of B tier here, I think. It's decent. You know, it's actually better in Fractals, right? This is one of those things I was talking about earlier. There's some deviations from this in Fractals. Renegade's pretty good in Fractals. Condition, Alacrity, Renegade, it's like, it's all right. It still requires a lot of boon duration and has been kind of out power crept, to be honest, by everything else in the game. So that's why it sits there. Let's go ahead and talk about Guardian next, and, well, it's going to be Firebrand. Firebrand, actually, weirdly enough, it is still incredibly strong, in my opinion. It certainly isn't quite as God Emperor tier as it was previously, but I still think it absolutely is one of the very, very top offensive support builds out there. Has all of the great Guardian utility with stability and Aegis, can throw in a bit of healing, condition cleansing, and so on. Has good damage output, just a very, very robust choice, but not quite as outrageous as it was before. And I think in general, I do really like the Herald right now for this. And let's do Engineer next. You were doing speedrun. I'm feeling the pace right now. So for Engie, I think we are actually going to be having Mech is an A tier. Power Mech, this is Power Alacrity Mechanist here. Incredibly powerful build. There's not much to say about it, really. It's just super, super reliable. It has boons. It has crowd control. It has good damage output at range. It's got a bit of barrier in there. You can actually very easily take Medkit and Condi Cleanse and even give some more boons there. There's just a lot of things that it does super, super well. It's very durable. It's tanky. It's almost like one of those kind of very, very robust all-round builds. It's very, very good. Next up, it's going to be Scrapper. And, yeah. So, here's the thing. Scrapper actually is really good. But I don't think I'd put it in A tier. I think, weirdly enough, Scrapper is in its own tier at exactly B+. And we don't need D tier. Like, there's nothing here that's going to be in D tier. Because I think it's not as good as Firebrand. Oh, wait, is that harsh? I actually really like Scrapper. I'm not sure I'd give it Power Mech and Firebrand tier. But it's actually really strong. The Revival is very, very good. It has excellent damage output, actually. Not quite. I think it's not quite as good as Herald, but it's still really good. Obviously, permanent super speed. And funnily enough, has a bunch of really useful stuff. It kind of heals a little bit. It has protection uptime as well. It can also stealth if you need that sort of thing too. But yeah, Scrapper, actually a really, really good option. Very, very good indeed. That's it for Engineer for offensive supports. Now, let's talk about Mesmer. Mirage is A tier. This build is actually probably one of the most underrated builds out there. And actually, I'm going to rename this to S tier, in fact. And I'm going to put Scrapper at A, and this is B+. So yeah, there it is, guys. I've changed my scheme halfway through, because actually this is much more appropriate. Because calling Mirage, Firebrand, and Mech A tier is insanity. Okay, these are all S tier. Mirage is a zillion damage. It does confusion, so it's broken on certain bosses, so that's fun. It gives 25 might. It can give stability really well with the mantra. It can do whatever you want. It can portal. It can blink. It can cleanse conditions. It does loads of damage. The alacrity uptime is now pretty wild, actually, because they kind of buff nerfed. They tried to get rid of the stacks build. Honestly, that didn't actually work that well, but they tried to. But now it's even easier to give alacrity, and you do 1 billion damage at the same time. This is a very, very good build. One of the more underplayed builds out there, because Mirage is a bit scary. But you know what? You should play it anyway. Chronomancer. 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 Chronomancer is B tier. It's one of those things that it's still a half-complete jigsaw. That's Chrono. It's not fully rounded. It has a lot of interesting things attached to it. It can do quickness. It kind of gives scuff protection. It can do all the Mesmer things, which is quite nice. But the problem is that you can do all those Mesmer things. You kind of do everything pretty okay. That's the problem. It doesn't really excel at stuff. And considering how power crept stuff like Herald is, it's a little bit fallen behind. But it is actually still a pretty good pick, because Mesmer just has a lot of good things that it can do, right? But yeah, Chrono, that's where it's staying. And this is something that is a bit of a weird thing to think about. But if you play Chrono, you aren't playing Virtuoso. And, well, we'll get to that later, but not playing Virtuoso, that could be a mistake. That could well be an error, my friends. You've got to watch out for that. You really, really do. But anyway, that's it for Mesmer. Next up, let's do Thief, Specter. Specter is actually S tier. In my opinion. Again, one of those builds that I think is underrated. It did get hit by the nerf bat with the Shroud changes, but it now has extra durability. It has 33% damage reduction while you're in Shroud. That really helps out. It doesn't heal quite as much as it used to, but it does still heal and barrier a good amount, all while doing excellent damage, Giving alacrity, giving a lot of might too. It actually gives around 11 stacks of might alongside fury, swiftness, and vigor to the team. Has amazing crowd. It's some of the most insane crowd control in the entire game, right? And of course, it is also ranged at the same time. It's surprisingly, it's not the fastest Condi build in the world, but it is actually relatively fast as well. Just an all-round, very strong pick in my opinion, and can really, really help and kind of soft carry groups super effectively. So I think Specter, absolutely an S tier pick. Let's do Elementalist. Let's do it. Let's go. And this is where we need some extra tiers, I think. Yeah, this is where we need a bit more memes, I think. Because Catalyst, you know, there was a brief moment in time when this build was really I really like this build. I want Quickness Catalyst to be good. I do. I admit it. I want it to be good. And it actually had a really good number, but then it turned out that regular Catalyst was kind of broken, so they had to nerf it, and then this build kind of deflated. It is now a little bit overshadowed by Herald. However, I actually do think this build it's pretty solid, I would say. I think we do need B+ here, because I think that Tempest and Catalyst both go into B+. Yes, I think they do. And with Catalyst, I'm talking about the quickness build, and this build is actually pretty cool. You know, it can do might, it can do fury, quickness, even has a little bit of Aegis now on the earth sphere, which is pretty cool. Gives resolution, bit of protection, has solid damage output there as well. It's pretty decent actually. So I think this actually ends up here alongside Tempest. This build is the Alacrity hybrid Tempest build. It's actually a really cool build actually. I like this a lot. The thing where it does fall behind, its damage output isn't incredible. And, you know, the Alacrity application is a bit weird with the way it actually operates, but it actually does a lot of things really, really well. It has a good heal skill with Wash the Pain Away. It can use Water Overload. It uses Warhorn, so it has boon extension. It can do 25 might, protection uptime. It can, of course, apply stability and Aegis. If you take the Eye of the Storm Shout for stability, you can take the Aegis from Aftershock. It actually does a lot of good things, like a lot of very, very good things on this build. And it has the Revive trait because you take the Arcane trait. It's an absolutely incredible. I love this build. It's so cool. It's a pure hybrid. You play Arcane, Fire, and Tempest, and you play Flame Legion runes, and you take Bountiful Power in Arcane. So you have like this super hybrid between power damage and condition damage. It's so cool. I love it. You even play a bunch of Selly pieces on it as well. So you have this full hybrid setup, and of course you could go full Celestial if you wanted to as well. I think this build is awesome. I think it just needs a few more tweaks, specifically to the Alacrity application and probably a bit more damage. I think this build is going to be absolutely awesome. I think it's really good. You know, don't be fooled by the B+. I think it's actually one of the more fun builds to play in the game, and very effective, actually, because it can adapt to the scenario really well. Ellie can change its utility skills pretty well. Well, Tempest, rather, actually, can change its utility skills quite effectively, and you just have a lot of tools in your toolkit, right? This is the strength of Ellie, right? Especially on Tempest, is that you have that water attunement, so you can go in there and use your healing skills, blast some water fills, and use Water Overload, and you can carry by doing that. You can carry hard, even throw in the rebound, too, if you want to. Or, of course, the Water Elemental, can do a massive burst of healing. Obviously, a slight DPS loss to use it over the Fire Elemental, but it's a massive area effect heal that can really carry, can bring some insane sustain to your team, while also still providing damage output and boons. And any build that applies 25 might should never be underestimated. But again, just needs a little bit of a nudge, I think, and this could very realistically be definitely A tier, or maybe even potentially with a proper nudge going into S tier, in my opinion. This is a build that learn it now before it becomes broken. Nice. Warrior. I do not like banners. All warrior quickness builds, in my opinion, go in C tier. The banner usability is just not good. You have to spam them off cooldown. You can't use your boons reactively or super speed or stability reactively. It's not good. There are some niche usages of this. For example, having permanent resistance on certain fights actually is really strong. It actually is really strong, I think, which is pretty cool. But other than that, it's a bit meh. I don't like it that much. That's not to say that Warrior is bad, by the way. I actually think that full DPS Warriors are actually very strong, especially Bladesworn and Spellbreaker. But in the offensive support category, I don't like Warrior at all, to be honest. I think, funnily enough, though, and this is the subtlety here. If Banner's got a usability tweak, so in other words, you could control when you apply stability, so have like a flip over skill, so you can control when you apply stab, I actually think these builds become very strong. Right, I think this would actually go up multiple tiers if that happened, because bear in mind, Warrior does a lot of damage right now, okay? And those abilities are stacked. Right now, Banner of Tactics, Stun Breaks, applies super speed stability, and it also gives regen, and it also, what did I say, break stuns? It does like a million things. It's like one of the most stacked abilities in the entire game. If you change that into an ability that is usable and can be used reactively, all of a sudden, that ability becomes very, very powerful in my opinion, and very strong. So, yeah. Keep your eye on Warrior, but for right now, I don't rate it very highly. Oh, yeah. I forgot about Willbender. And you know what? Even though this build it's actually not horrible, I am going to actually go ahead and give it a new tier here. This is Willbender tier at the bottom. And actually, no, I'm going to rename that, and it's ArenaNet Forgot Me. Right, for Willbender. Because honestly, that really is how I feel about Willbender. They kind of tacked Alacrity onto it at the end of the beta, but then they just completely left it there and forgot about it entirely, which is funny considering it's Guardian. But yeah, Willbender, it's just one of those things that it could be good, and it's not bad, right? To be clear, I put it below C tier for a meme. Realistically, it's in C tier, but I put it in a meme tier to kind of get the point across here. ArenaNet just kind of forgot about it. They haven't updated it. It hasn't really found its identity, you know, that thing that it can do. You know, it can do the Guardian stuff. It can do stability, right? It can do some good damage and give Alacrity, but it just doesn't have a thing. It needs a thing that it can do, in my opinion, which it hasn't really found yet. Anyway, moving swiftly onwards, let's do Necromancer, right? Necromancer, here we go. Harbinger. This, to me, is a B-tier build. It's alright. It does a lot of damage, actually, but it doesn't really have that carry potential or excitement potential, in my opinion, that other builds we've seen on this list do. So, it's alright. It's okay. I think it's a little bit too bound to spamming its utility skills off cooldown. Its boon duration, its boon application is very mediocre, to be frank, actually. Good if you want to really go fast. I think it can bring some high damage to the table. But other than that, I am highly unimpressed by Harbinger overall. Now, Scourge. I am going to put Hybrid Offensive Scourge in here. And I'm going to put it... You know how I said I'm not going to do a lot of tiers? I may have to revise that statement. Because this actually does go in a bit of a special tier here. Do I even want to list Scourge on this tier list? I'm not actually sure if I do. Let me think. Because Heal Scourge is the most broken build in the entire game. This is a fact. Right? I think I'm going to kill it. I think we're going to save it. We're going to actually save it. We're going to save it, guys. We're going to save it for the healer one. Okay? So here's the thing. Heal Scourge in the hybrid build, especially, I'll tell you a little secret. It actually synergizes amazingly with Herald. Right? And because of that, because Herald's really good, this makes Scourge really good. And basically the Celestial or Plague Doctor hybrid build is actually a pretty robust healer and can apply 10 target barrier. Doesn't really apply boons, like a little bit of might, kinda, right? But that's not the point. It just has so much carry potential and reasonable damage output, actually, that it is one of the strongest builds in the game. However, I'm not going to put it on this tier list because I don't think it quite fits with what these builds are. We'll actually go ahead and put it in the defensive support option. We'll talk about the hybrid build there as well. Just a touch. Just a little bit. We'll talk about it a bit. And I think our final build is going to be Untamed, actually. I think it's going to be Untamed here. And... ooh... see, I have to try to see through my personal bias here. I really like Untamed a lot, and I think I'm quite likely to overrate it. I think I'm going to put it in B+. This build is just so much fun to play, and so exciting, and so dynamic, that it's got to be up here somewhere. Like, it has to be. I wonder if it's A tier. Oh, man. It's so good. It does loads of damage, does a billion CC, right? Can actually do some really crazy utility with, like, reviving people, with spamming Spirit of Nature. It can break stun all the time, right? With Protect Me and stuff like that. It can immobilize all the time. Oh, man. Maybe it's got to be A tier. Like, I might have to put it in A tier. I think it's so good. It is a bit tricky to play. No, I think it's... Yeah, it removes boons. I might have to put it in B+, purely because it's weird on certain bosses and a bit gimmicky. Right? Like, that's the thing. It's a bit of a gimmicky build, and it might lose points because of that. Because it is weird. You know what? It's Christmas. A tier. Yeah! It's Christmas. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas, Untamed mains. You're in. You are in. And I like it a lot. It's lots of damage, lots of CC, amazing utility, really fun to play. Tanky as well, actually, especially with the new hammer changes. It has a lot more sustain on it, just passive sustain on the hammer as well. And you can even play the hybrid build if you want to, the kind of hybrid. I personally really enjoy that. I used it to solo Old Lion's Court. And it was really fun. It's a lot of fun. It's great for open world too, actually. I'm a big Untamed enjoyer, actually. Yes. Good. I think that is it for our offensive supports. Yeah, notably Druid doesn't really have an offensive support build. It's, you know, you just play it as a full support. None of this stuff really does. Vindicator, I mean, you could, you know, well, no, actually. Well, yeah, no, not really. I'm pretty sure that's about it for this kind of stuff. Yes. Yes. Grouch has arrived. I'm reviewing CMC's work, Grouch. Okay, this is CMC performance review, right? Thanks for the resub, man. And of course, 10 gifted subs from MM. I really appreciate that, dude. Okay. No, yeah, no, I will say, very notably, I didn't put Daredevil here, because Daredevil is busted as a support, obviously, on certain fights where you have the Ecto, but you don't always have Detonate Plasma, right? And therefore, I don't think it's very sensible to put Daredevil on a support tier list, because it's this one gimmick that makes the build work. And again, that's just not quite right. It is not quite right. But that's it. Offensive supports, job done.